Welcome back, everyone. I just wanted to take some time to go over the currently proposed specs to begin with, and then we can briefly discuss slide specs and see if there are any slide specs that need more attention or they need to be converted to full spec, and then we can provide feedback for those. So at the end of this week, we want to basically filter out all the specs that we think we can get done for Newton, and for those we think we need to provide more feedback in terms of what they need to improve on, what the timeline looks like, what are the blockers, etc., and possibly ask them to propose against Okata. So that will give us a good direction in terms of our review backlog for the rest of the cycle. Just focus on the important features and prioritize reviews accordingly, as well as we can ensure that we feed into the right product working group roadmap and other surrounding discussions for the other contracts that we support in the community for Newton and the following cycles accordingly. So with that, let me start with one of the light specs that I thought probably needed some feedback from specifically CEF or volume driver or folks who are familiar with that driver, and see if we needed to basically give early feedback for the author to make it a full spec. This becomes an important thing because it's tied to the Glance store. We are also having an overlapping proposal for API refactor and stuff. So I just want to make sure nothing is conflicting. There's no multiple conflicting interests, and if there are, how do we have a plan for resolving that? So if you see line number 180, that's on the Midcycle Etherpad. Let me link that again on the chat. So line number 180. So that's enable passing extra properties to the client store drivers. I read through the problem statement, and it seems like there are some situations where they need to at least volume features need to be more aware of when to do copy on write or do the backend storage rather than streaming through Glance, and they need some sort of properties to identify that. I wasn't able to come up with an alternative solution that will give them clear indication of that. I did think a little bit about simply passing in a flag option of maybe a Boolean or an enum that will ensure that the right decision can be made. But if it's tied to any specific volume features that need to be supported as a service, or it needs to be part of the user or operator contract, then something like property protections is a valid thing to do. And as a part of that, I just wanted to see if there are any CEF experts or volume experts here who can provide feedback if this light spec looks fine, or if we need to get like a more detailed feedback on the use case and what the work items and the proposal look like. Maybe even a few snippets of code too.
So I have one concern about this, which is if we start passing properties to the store, wouldn't that basically expose those properties for the end user as well, which would effectively cause that we expose the backend configuration of the deployment to end user, and that seems to have been on the wider OpenStack community big no.
Yeah. So I mean, this definitely ties up with some of the image lifecycle management with property stuff. But um, yeah, so do you have any specific input, like why it's bad for end users having those system properties there?
No, I mean, listening the wide OpenStack community, the message what certain people are yelling all the time is that the backend is not end users' concern, and we must not give out any details of the backend implementation to the end user. If we start using image properties and pushing them through the store driver, that effectively means that we expose those backend specifics to the end user, doesn't it? So that's kind of the problem I see there is that how we solve that in the way that there is possibility to specify something or put something backend specific which actually doesn't uh, get exposed to the user.
Yeah, so I think you're right in terms of not exposing the backend, because like this is a specific case where like backend operation is dependent on image properties, right? I think we do have a case where like billing and stuff is being used for Nova scheduling. Sorry, not billing, what I'm saying. Like licensing or OS type properties are used for Nova scheduling, like depending on hypervisor host and stuff like that. I don't think this is exactly related to that, because Nova itself is a consumer of glance, whereas what we're talking about is glance store seeing these properties from the database. Having said that, I don't know if we can. I think we may need like a propose or an operator story or a proposal for like coming up with operator specific properties. But I want to like uh, isolate that sort of proposal with this one, because this one seems specific to a type of uh, copy on write thing that they want to do, right? So maybe there is an easier way to do this rather than introducing this like a completely different architectural change to what we have. So I think you're right. So here's the thing. I was on the thought train that um, this light spec isn't like enough information, is like whether this is going to be specific service or specific driver and stuff. So do you think, I mean, like, do you all think that we should have a full spec for this, or this is a completely no? It's like a -2 sort of thing. Or does anybody have like a good solution, good workaround solution? Nothing? Or silence?
I'm just rereading through the light spec and trying to think how we can actually do this.
Okay.
This this is again really one of those things that would need or would greatly benefit of us having the service tokens, because it's basically something that users shouldn't be ever need to touch, like literally ever.
Yeah, and even if you make it like admin only, um, would that solve the use case? What I'm thinking.
That wouldn't help because that would then demand that every single one of these, for example, these cloning calls would need to be done by admin, not the normal user. That's what I mean. Like if we had the service user and we could just enable this, like, okay, when Cinder calls us on it this way, we pass that information forward. When end user does it or reads the image, it doesn't expose this specific thing. That would be just fine. But I really don't see any reasonable way how we could do this on our current implementation in a way that we don't expect the end user being key player defining how our backend is behaving, which is, in my point of view, not acceptable option.
Sounds like a good plan. So let's add a dependency for service token on this. I think Niall has a spec proposed for this, the service token support, and I think that will help.
Yeah, I think we are starting to have quite a long queue of stuff that would be actually so much easier to implement if we got that service token. So that starts to sound like really good thing if we are able to actually do that.
Sounds good. So that brings me to the to the next spec. We discussed this a little bit. Let me find the link. Line number 184. That's property protection modification with the service tokens. We discussed this yesterday. It's a full spec. I think the scope was
Yeah, it is.
Scope was well defined. So if I read back on the notes, so we just provided the feedback on the spec, and it seems that wait, okay, no, that's not. Yeah, sorry. So the feedback is still on the Etherpad. I took the wrong one. Apologize for that.
I think the main thing we were talking about was the fact that my example used was Nova related, but obviously, like looking at them other ones, you've got like Cinder that could possibly use this.
So maybe
Niall,
update your.
Are these service tokens now like fully supported and implemented in Keystone finally, or because that has been at least what has been pending on this work before that we haven't got the support from Keystone side?
I think I did see somewhere that it was supported, but I'm not completely sure on that. It might have been Keystone middleware that I saw.
As far as I know, I talked with Keystone folks, and they told me that they want to deprecate the service tokens because they said they're deadly burned. So they want to implement new stuff in Keystone, but it will be available not just in a kata, maybe even more later. And they didn't recommend me to use service token from Keystone.
So what's our alternative until they actually start supporting this service token like feature?
Okay, I'm back.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, my my logins reconnected again. So I said that Keystone folks didn't recommend me to use service tokens because they didn't like it and they wanted to rebuild the whole conception of service tokens. We should discuss it with Jimmy Lennox, I think.
Okay. So I think like that's a good feedback for Niall. Let me add that to the Etherpad as well, and then that's an action item for all of us actually.
That's interesting news because we have basically been waiting for the service tokens to land and being supported from Keystone side for I think couple of years now, since it was first time discussed, and now when it's finally there so that we could use them, they are turning for Silk Road around and planning to deprecate it. That's really bad.
Yeah, Keystone is having some turbulent times, I think. Yeah, but let's not get into details. All right, so I've added an action item for Niall, and Niall, you can ping me if you wanted to sync with Steve and Jamie and Brant about this. Okay, so I think both of these are blocked and seems unlikely for Newton, because unless we have a good direction from Keystone, we cannot identify that. So let's try to get the feedback this week. And if we don't have a good alternative for service token by end of Friday, then we cannot do this for Newton. Unfortunately, because we have I think 14 more specs to read through, or 13 more. All right. Moving on to line number 187. So sorry, look at line number 188. I think like these are a couple of proposals that sort of overlap, if you may. Not necessarily overlap, but I would say one implementation would help other or otherwise. So let's talk about Fei Long's proposal first. He proposed the full spec. We have been discussing this for a while now. So I think the point was to use provide some sort of validation of the existence of that project ID in Keystone before actually adding the member on an image. And that way, if there is error while inputting the member ID, you don't have redundant data in the database, and then the owner and the consumer both are happy in terms of determining if the sharing actually worked, rather than having to basically wonder how what went wrong, right? So definitely in terms of user experience, I see the point. But I see we have a lot of comments from other folks. So I do have some performance related wonderment, but I'll let people talk here if they have any specific feedback. Just for reference, it's review number 321-200. 321-200.
Yeah, so I was really thinking if I should -2 that or if I leave it to -1. I just wanted to leave my comment there so that I actually have understood the proposal correctly. But as it seems now, I think in security perspective, we definitely cannot do that. So the problem is that the user who is issuing the command does not have the right to ask from Keystone if a project is a valid project, and we are effectively proxying that with this proposal through Glance that would use its own admin token and relate the information back to the user. That's security-wise, that's absolutely not acceptable solution.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you. So, first time I chatted with Fei Long, I told him that, if an end user does a show on an image ID, like a get image ID that is not in their list, they should get a 404, right? So this sort of breaks that contract. But I think somebody like Fei Long pointed out that for quotas and stuff, they do some sort of user validation. And I was really, that sort of surprised me in terms of how they're taking that trade-off of validating the Keystone member versus the security impact that you're talking.
So who is doing that?
I think he mentioned Nova for sure. I don't know what other service is doing it. So what they do is for quota updates, so for quota setting and updates, I think they validate if the member exists in Keystone, because if it doesn't, then you can have potential race conditions also, right? So if you remove a member, then a sort of quota is invalidated. And another thing is if you enter a wrong member ID, then the quota won't be able to actually validate if the usage has been done correctly or not. So it's sort of like a good trade-off there in terms of quota, because you can potentially have inventory issues if your quota system isn't very secure, versus if you expose your member ID verification, then you are insecure from the Keystone point of view. So it's like a between rock and a hard place.
Yeah, well, I don't care if it's Nova or if it's someone else, but proxying admin calls to another project because user doesn't have a rights to do so that's just pure wrong. Like,
I agree with Erno on this. I think maybe the what we can recommend to Fei Long is to take it up with Keystone about why don't they expose this at the user level, and then we can fight out the security issues at that point. But I think Erno's completely right. I mean, this is just a straightforward proxy of that one call. So it's as if we are allowing that call to be made by normal users in a cloud. So I think that the place to take this discussion would be to Keystone, and then once they approve, once they approve doing this, then it's no problem for us. But I was kind of skeptical about the security implications. But I mean, the way Erno just put it, that I mean, it's clear. It's just a straightforward proxy. I mean, you just use the add image of member, and you are getting the same exact information you'd have if you made the call directly to Keystone. Anyway, that's all I got to say. And I can't hear anything, so I have no idea Anybody heard me?
Yeah, I heard you. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. I'm adding the node to the Etherpad line number 190. All right, so I think we are safe to -2 that for now, because we already have a better route for them to alleviate their concerns. So
Cheers. Feel free to take the honors.
all right, so how about the next one, the line number 191? Member ID should not contain special characters. Review number 315, 388.
I think I have a +2 from me there already. I think that that makes absolutely sense that we validate that the characters given are actually something that is on the known range what Keystone supports.
I think somebody had a question on this. I don't think there was any specific one, right? Yeah, so no major concerns on this one. So, and I was sort of okay, but I wanted some more feedback on Fei Long's proposal. So, since we are -2 that, I think this level of validation seems okay. And having a light spec is fine for this because it's a small change. Although I think there is API impact, what he says. All right, so I think probably question for him is like, what is the API impact basically?
Nikhil, are we talking about a return in conflict?
We are talking about member ID should not contain special characters. That's review number 315, 388, line number 191.
I'm sorry because I'm on another meeting, but I'm listening to you. So I think next one will be mine. It's return in conflict when we are want to set location to save an image. So I'll be here.
Yeah, one second. Let me finish this one, and I think we should be done in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So, Mike, if you wanted to, get out of the meeting and then discuss all of your specs towards the end of the call, then I think that's fine too. We can go over the other specs until then. That's why I had pushed back because you mentioned being on a.
No, it's not necessary. So. It's okay.
Okay, but yeah, this what comes to the impact on this one is basically that we will return 400 back request if there is so-called illegal characters. My point of view is that it's still fine as a light spec. It's quite straightforward and simple. It's well-defined scope, but what's other things?
I'm also agree with you because if I understand correctly, Keystone doesn't support any project or tenant or user IDs with special characters. So if we will introduce this change, I'm not sure that it will be a big impact on API. So
Yeah,
also
the
in favor.
only impact is effectively that we don't push those IDs anymore into our database and think that they are okay, while we know for a fact that Keystone will not accept them.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of library or
So I
something
think
where the Keystone constraints are published?
Not sure. I didn't heard about such kind of library. I know that it's UU IDs by default.
Yeah. So
Okay.
not
But
just by
I
default.
know there's some.
They are using UUIDs. So
Yeah.
But I know there are older clouds that aren't using UUIDs. So I'm wondering whether the UUID is like the default or whether it's required. And I think it's the default, but not required. So my concern here is just, I mean, the pound sign is probably right unproblematic, but in general, what we'd want to do is match the actual Keystone constraints and what's acceptable as a tenant ID, not make this a UUID.
yeah, if that's the case, that it's just a default, but it can't be specified for something else, then yeah, we definitely need to make sure that whatever the constraints are, what we are exposing is actually aligned with Keystone.
Yeah, I'll just put that comment on the spec.
Thanks, Brian.
okay. Are we good to move on to the next one?
Yep.
Looks like yes. So let's move to line number 195, which is returning a 409 if setting a location to saving image. That's Mike. Mike, you're here.
Mike.
Yeah, I'm here. So we found this bug when we were implementing Glare, and the problem is that when we want to set location to save an image, it's okay, and it's only in V2. In V1, when we wanted to do it, Glance returns bad request. I think bad request is not a good response here, and conflict is much more appropriate. Moreover, we implemented this behavior in Glare as well. So when someone wants to change saving or active blob, set location to it, then Glare returns 409, so it's conflict. And I implemented this code. It's just a simple if, but I found out that Stuart McLaren considers that there may be some race conditions, but I think it's not about race conditions. Race conditions should be fixed in different patch. There will be a spec, I think. But yeah. So the code is pretty simple. So if image status is not queued or active, Glance will return conflict. That's all.
Yeah, I was like in two minds about this after reading Stuart's comment. Anybody has any feedback to help to advise? I see a +2 already.
Great.
Yeah, I think it just made sense. Like that's again one of those things that that solves one of the big issues on the API, and it's actually really clean fix in a sense. And the problem really is, like we have been discussing so many times before, that to avoid the race conditions on these APIs, we just have to implement some level of locking. Otherwise, there is just no way we can get rid of all the possible race conditions out there.
Yeah.
So what comes to the Stuart's comment, I think, yeah. So yeah, I think the commit message could be actually a little bit clearer. So basically, when that commit goes in, it states after that, like that at the point when that commit has been merged, that user can set the custom location to an image even if it has saving or deactivated status. So perhaps clarifying that this commit, or just removing actually that first sentence from there and just stating that this commit prevents a user changing or setting customer location to an image which is on saving or deactivated, and returns 409. That would be reasonable, I think.
So I just remove the first sentence, and the spec is okay.
Well, just change the two sentences to specifying that just that the commit actually changes the behavior, rather than if you look the git commit git log. When you look the git log, it looks like that after that has committed in, the case is still that user can set the custom location. So just change the wording in a way that that there is no way to misunderstand that, and I think the change itself is fine.
Yeah, the change looks fine from my side too. Yeah, I think like let's document that there is no race condition of any sorts, and if we want to fix those real edge cases, then we need like a better mechanism, sort of more atomicity in the code, but that cannot be part of this proposal. And let's make sure that we add release notes and stuff for this, because again, like if some people are going to use this feature, then we need to make sure that this behavior is documented. It's definitely changing. It may affect some operators, if I may, and it's definitely changing significant operator friendliness. But that's okay, because we need to focus on like a core aspect of image locations and a better story around it. So I think like this is a good direction. Let's go ahead with it.
Yeah, so I think Stuart has really good point on pretty much all his comments regarding the documentation side of that patch, but technically I'm pro for it.
+1 to that. Does that help, Mike?
Yeah. So I'll update the spec. If you can, please leave your comments there.
Actually, I think the spec is fine if you just update the code change in itself. to actually being aligned with the spec. So if you just change the commit message on the code change itself, the light spec looks fine by me. It's just the code change that you have linked into the light spec that I think has the problem, rather than the spec itself.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is the distinction layer. So I see it got a multiple +2, so I am guessing it's mostly okay. There were some outstanding questions on this, but it seems to be resolved or not favored against, right? So let's see. I don't know. I think probably we just need testing on this and documentation. So besides that, I provided my feedback about isolating this to a specific use case of isolating or distinguishing properties and stuff. So
yeah, so I think only comment I have about this, I'm not sure about that I have actually read the last patch yet, but just if there is still any statements that it actually fixes our race conditions, I would rather see those changed to reduces the possibility of them, because by no means this will actually block any race conditions to happen. But that's only input what I have about this one.
Sorry, I'm trying to be on 2 meetings in one time. Kairat, are you here?
okay, so Mike. Hey Mike.
Yeah.
So let me actually get back to glare and distinction layer at the end of the meeting, and hopefully we should be done by then. We can focus on the other specs until then. Right. I'm gonna readjust a little bit our numbers here to make sure that we go in the order. On to the next one, which is use UTF in the collision of the image tags specific to a MySQL database. Yeah, I've had some fixes around this. I think like some 500 earlier, but I don't know. I saw the update lowercase. I fixed it for I think the image name. I think it'll be okay to fix this for tag too, unless someone has issue. I'm mostly okay with it.
So quick question about this. Anyone has idea how it behaves on the other databases? Because I personally think that our behavior needs to be uniform basically regardless of the database. So if we are doing this on MySQL, we need to make sure that all the rest of our supported databases are case sensitive as well.
So I think not all databases have this issue, but I think having documented information on. So the thing is, like in OpenDB, whenever we consider database, it's mostly MySQL. But I do understand there are a lot of operators who use different databases. So I think having a good documented behavior of how we are handling for a specific database type would really help. But if this is like a 500 sort of a thing, then it would be good to fix it. Yeah, if you see the bug number attached to the spec, it says internal surface error, which is 500. Right. So I think with good I think this should be okay to go.
So my question is, if this is purely a bug and affects only MySQL, why on earth we have a light spec out of this? I think that's something we should consider as a bug fix rather than a spec implementation.
Yeah, that's fine. So I mean, a bug fix with release node would be fine. Yeah, I don't see issue with not having a light spec. Yeah, but I'm okay with it.
More of just documentation, because at least we have been discussing that light specs are for small functionalities. This is clearly a bug fix, so I think it should be tagged as so and released as so rather than released as feature change.
Yeah, it's not really a feature change. It does impact the API in terms of, but it's not really impacting the API in terms of the usual impact scenarios we consider. It does help alleviate my 500 that it gives. But I think you're right. It does incline towards more of a bug fix. And bug fix with release notes is like a fine approach. So I think we can ask to remove the light spec, which will help us review less on the specs again.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's drop that light spec and treat that as a bug fix and do follow appropriately. I think that's cleaner for everyone, for us on workflow wise, and for whoever is trying to look what we actually have done when we release this code.
Sounds good. All right, so I added that comment on line 211, and if nothing else, we can move to the next one. Okay, let's move on. So don't deprecate the file endpoint. We had some back and forth, and I think It's just one comment from Brian. I think we need this for Nova, so I don't see issues. What do you think? Policies though, like we can think about policies next cycle. For now, we just need to focus on like Nova using white and blue and not worry about.
Yeah, so I didn't actually care that much about the wording. In a sense, like I was more concerned about the information what we have on the currently merged spec, what states that we are deprecating the file endpoint, which is something that Nova is extensively using even after moving to V2. So I think that's just something we need to get out of the spec.
All right, so I just have a couple of comments and then questions, and then I think that should be like a small change can go. Just go there. Yeah, I mean, can somebody add their nick in front of that yellow comment they're adding? It's not me.
Oh yeah, it's me. I'll put it there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very slightly different yellow than yours.
Yeah, so I mean, no, I'm very fond of this public versus private branch deployment because their stack doesn't have it. So we can deprecate it, and the other is I don't really have data. So at this point, that's the only endpoint, and until the import method matures and it's accepted by different stakeholders, we can really go aggressive on deprecation.
Yeah, so Nikhil, what we've been doing before, for example, is that because it's totally possible that you have a glance node with different configuration with way wider privileges, let's say behind a firewall, and you have your public facing nodes deployed on a different IP that is exposed to the end users. So that's basically what it's referring. It's not referring admin API and public API, because we don't have such.
I mean, I do understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to think in terms of the effort that they're trying to do for the standardization of service catalog. At this point, they don't really have a good solution for the Glance API servers that are specified as a part of the Nova config that you're talking about, because those are like operator has deployed that for internal services in Nova and Cinder. But in the future, what they want to do is like have a single endpoint that is defined even in Nova config or end users or whatever. But again, like it's like a whole mess of opinions. So for now, like all right, let's not get into, it's already a complicated situation with interoperability and then DevCore and all those things. So let's not try to troll this particular sensitive proposal. Anything that's related to DevCore and public-facing endpoint, public-facing API and end users is hard for us right now.
It's a very, very sensitive topic.
I'll move on to the. Oh yeah. Okay, I'll move on. So I think like we are running short of time. I'll move on to the next one, which is centralizing config options. It has a, okay, it still has a -2. Yeah. So AIM updated that patch. Let's see what. Let's have a duel here.
No, I just rebased that patch, but there is no substantial difference to what was there earlier. So I think we're pretty much stuck at that point where we're not making any progress on it. So from what I remember,
let's wait a bit. Okay. Right.
No, I was saying that from what I remember, Arno's primary contention with that was we may be breaking some of the config by centralizing them to one. So I was wondering, what if towards the end of the cycle, when we're probably done with most of the work, is that a good time to attempt that and see if it breaks anything? And if it doesn't, can we do that at that point?
Can you elaborate?
No, I mean like we don't want to break, right? I share that concern too, but unless we try, we don't know if it's going to break. We're going to breaking anything, right? So I also understand why Arno is saying that, because we don't have enough test coverage, or probably we don't have confidence in our test coverage at this point to say, even if we get a green run, we don't know if if all the the movement of config options is not breaking anything. So I was wondering, is there a point in time in this cycle where we can safely test that and not give up on it?
Well, that's kind of my biggest problem is that because at least I don't have the trust that our test suite is on our own tests, nor on the Tempest side is covering all that. The only way I see that we figure out if we broke something is by making the change and releasing the code. And in that point, I think we are on really dangerous waters if we end up breaking someone's implementation just because we wanted to move those bits of code around without really in my point of view, a really heavy reason to do so.
Yeah, so neither would I want to break anyone's implementation, but this is a very subjective matter, and I'm trying to see if you're being overly cautious. And if that's the way to go, that's completely fine. I don't want to be like pushing this at the risk of like breaking plans. But yeah, really, I really don't have a good answer to Arno's concern, and I feel like I'm at a crossroads and I can't progress any further here.
No, so I mean, we can take the subjective discussion into a more objective one, right? So I think the concern is that we do not have, because testing, the only way to test, only way to figure out if something is going to break or not is to test it, basically. And I think then probably next step would be identify some of the configure options that you're planning to centralize and see if the test exists or not, right? So if we can figure out some of those, then we can say yes or no in terms of release, at least objective.
I mean, we could do that. I mean, I know, I'm sure we'll get a green run one way or the other. Like, we can fix the test. But what Erno is saying, and I agree what he's saying, is that even if we get a green run, we're not completely confident that we're covering all paths, and then something else could still be breaking.
And on addition on that, I think the idea of moving just some of them based on the fact that we know that those paths are specifically tested well is not really achieving, if not even working backwards what you want to achieve, Hammond, because I think if we start centralizing and we centralize some and then we leave still like half of them somewhere else, that's probably giving even a worse signal than just leaving them be as they are.
Well, that's the case even today. We have some of the configs centralized in glance common config.py, and some of them reside very close to their usage. So we're not going to end up in any better or worse situation than what we're currently. But like you said, it's really doesn't help me achieve my goal of centralizing everything. So I'm not going to take a part solution to a step further and still be a part solution.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like it probably won't help you on what you want to achieve anyway. So I don't think doing the job partially is any more acceptable solution.
Right. So I share your concern, and I know I would want to see what others think about this, but centralization is not really the essential part of the larger cross-project spec effort. It's just one of the optional steps. So we can completely ignore centralization for now if everyone shares the same concern and if it's something we're all serious about. So I'm completely fine with dropping it.
Let's see. Let's see if anybody else has input on this, like Brian, Niall, Mike, Karat. Anybody?
Any strong opinions? Now is good time to try to convince me otherwise.
I mean, like let's have a direction right now, right? Because if we say yes, then yes. If we say no, then no. And I think we're inclining towards no. So, and what Anno says is pretty correct, right? Now is the time to basically speak up and say, oh, this may help us or this may not help us or whatever.
Right. So,
Yes.
Go ahead, Nikhil.
No, I just pointed out Mike and Karat because they may be having some sort of experience while implementing Claire too. So input from them also will help. But let's hear from you actually more.
So if we are talking about Glance config options, it's in Glare to-do list right now. So it's planned to do something with Glare config, if we hear.
So Mike, we are talking about the centralizing the configuration options, and just input. Do you see any like big benefit doing that? Do you, for example, have you seen when you have been doing Glare that would actually bring you some huge advantage, or do you have any strong opinions about the topic?
We didn't found any good reason to do that because there are not a lot of config options in Glance and in Glare. And for example, in Nova, they have about 100 config options, maybe even more. And yeah, they centralize it. But in Glare, we didn't found, I said, no reason of to do that. But in Glance, I'm not sure, but I think the same. Our config options are good at this moment.
So that's a fair pushback, right? So even if you look at the current config options in Glance, even though we don't centralize the way Nova centralized it, most of the Glance configuration options are still centralized. And it's a mix of most of the options residing in Glance common config.py versus some options being in their own file. So it's a hodgepodge really. So we're neither here nor there. So either arguments don't really hold, saying that hey, we want to centralize because of these reasons, and that also doesn't hold. And the other argument saying we don't want to centralize because our usages we want our definitions to be near our usage. That doesn't hold either, because we do a hybrid approach, and I don't see if we have a good reason why we do the way we do today.
Yeah, I agree on that, and as I have been saying, my main concern is actually the refactoring and the risk of breaking something rather than actually any like technical reasons why we should be one way or another.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to do centralization was not to solve anything that is existing currently, but going forward, if you wanted to do any of the categorization stuff where we're improving the help text, or looking at all the config options to see the dependencies between them and all of that, it's just easy if they're all in one place, right? So now it's a fair pushback to say we don't have enough options to get that benefit that Nova gets out of doing it. So it's a fair pushback. So we need not necessarily do it if you think it's gonna add more headache to us. It's like Brian has something to add and he can't say because he's muted.
Could we get to the stage in the future when we would have enough options to make this viable? So it'd be better off to do it now before we get to that stage.
I certainly hope not. In my point of view, if I could make the decision, we would harden Glance and put it on the maintenance mode and tap it done. But I'm not sure if we can get there. But I certainly hope that we are not exploding our config options by multitudes.
So I think that's why I was suggesting an iterative approach where we centralize a couple of maybe 2-3 config options for release, and that way we can narrow down our breakpoints. That will be more predictable, is what I'm saying. I can't hear who's talking. It's very low.
Yeah, maybe
I
we
think
could try that.
Well, I think the biggest benefit would be pretty much having it done now, before Hemant started his big work of actually rationalizing the help text and doing the major changes on those texts. And in that sense, like I don't think we will have any of that benefit anymore at the point if we start doing it 1 or 2 points per cycle and end up with centralized config options in somewhere within next 3 years and being on the state that oh yeah, now we have them all nice together, but all the work why we wanted this is done already.
I don't know how many are not centralized, because Hemant mentioned that there was a hybrid approach. So I was just hoping that there are maybe like 5 or 10 or something like that, and we can do that in a couple of cycles or something.
No, I'd say we are more like
50-50.
50-50 plus minus 10% either way.
That's a tough situation. All right. So I mean, like, what's the general feeling, right? Yeah.
I gathered a list of all the config options we have in Glance. I just pasted the link to the Etherpad in the chat, so you could see what are centralized, what are not. So one other
Actually,
issue,
there's
like
that many.
yeah, it's mostly the registry stuff.
If you duplicate registry,
Yeah. So one other thing we ran into like lately while doing the help text stuff is that we saw some of the config options duplicated, the exact same options in 2 different files, and Oslo config doesn't complain because everything else is similar. Like the help text is similar, the min max and defaults are similar. The moment if you change one of them in one of the files, it starts throwing a duplicate error. Now this happened with Dharani, who was she was trying to change the endpoint help text, and that appears both in glance versions.py and glare versions.py. Now, of course, she couldn't do the same text for both of them because one addresses glance and the other addresses glare. The moment she changed the help text, it starts throwing duplicate option error. Now, how do we go about resolving those stuff if we don't have all the options in one place? It's basically a copy paste stuff, right? So we copy paste and then we forget that there is another one until it blows up.
But if one is of glare and one is of glance, they should be on different blocks. They shouldn't be ever pulled by config generator or the code to the actual same spot.
Right, but since we copy pasted, it's easier. This is what exactly Nova says. Like they don't exactly want us to import stuff always, but if all the config options are in one place, it's easier for you to see what you can reuse, what you can't reuse, right? But anyway, like neither of these arguments are important enough when you say if we do centralization, we may break stuff. So I don't want to break anything. But I'm saying, there are all these advantages if we do it, but none of them, take precedence over breaking plans. And I really don't know how to improve that.
Thanks. So if you think so as well, let's drop that work from our plan list and let's focus of getting those config options sensible and getting the help text sensible, and let's put our focus and our efforts for something else than trying to ridiculously find if we happen to break anything by moving them around.
Yeah, we could do that for the cycle and maybe come back and see if we have confidence enough in our test next cycle or the following cycles to do it. I'm fine if you want to drop it for Newton at least.
Sounds good to me. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, success. We have a decision. Perfect. All right, so I guess I think a few folks want to leave early, so we have a few specs to discuss. Let me go over the subtractive one for now. It is the line number 223, review number 299,726. So I did spend a fair amount of time on this one, and I think we don't really have a clear direction on this, on what we want to do in terms of subtracting, because like I suggesting, we've done block subtractive changes, but then we cannot really do that because there may be reasons for doing those changes on the database. So we'll have to be strict in evaluating which database we are going to allow. If we are planning to implement like rolling upgrades using Oslo version updates, something like that, then evaluating these changes becomes important. So I wasn't like very optimistic doing this in Newton, but I'm willing to hear feedback from folks on this.
No offense, but I think we have so much bike shedding still to go with the image import process that I'd rather not take this on Newton if we don't have a clear vision and clear simple solution how this should be done. I'd say let's postpone this when we actually have cycles to think it through properly.
Yeah, I would agree. This primarily hinges on how we do rolling upgrades, and we don't know yet how we are doing rolling upgrades in Glance. So this is almost like jumping the gun and trying to commit to something we don't know. So I would say no to Newton and probably take it up once we have a spec for rolling upgrades.
I agree with Mark on that.
All right, let's move to the registry application. I actually am having somebody at the door, so just give me a couple minutes.
The registry deprecation, or what's the next?
Yeah, I think it's the registry deprecation next.
Okay, I'm back. So I guess we discussed rolling upgrades yesterday, and there was some discussion about different types of upgrades that we could, the upgrade strategies that we could think about. Now, rolling upgrades is a very broad topic, and
Can I comment something on this?
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't be on the earlier discussion. I think I'm gonna make lots of friends with this statement, but we get rid of the V1 registry with the V1 images API deprecation, and I think we should deprecate the V2 registry because that's one of the most horrific pieces of coding glance. And when we figure out how we want to do the upgrades, and if we need some extra layer like the conductor, I'm more happy as to actually rewrite it from the scratch than utilizing our current registry.
Yeah, so I think with the V1 API deprecation, I think registry deprecation goes hand in hand. I think the V2 registry is, I don't know how it's going to behave well with the upgrades. So yeah, I think we sort of agreed to wait just a little bit because Rosmita and Hemant were going to write a spec on the upgrades, and I think we have about a month, and so before the spec has to be released. So once we reach that date, we can come back and see what we want to do. Sorry? So spec release is on July 29, which is release -10 week. And I think that should, 10 weeks is good enough time for us to do the right thing, registry application and approve the spec and everything. So we don't really have to rush here. We did things. I'm sort of more pro this proposal at this point, and I agree that having this conductor written from scratch would be a good thing. But then again, I think we need to take more informed decision in terms of what exactly is the best upgrade way for us. And if it's the conductor way, then I think we can just quickly identify what registry is doing and see if it makes sense to keep that. Anyway, we're going to keep it for until the queue cycle. So if it makes sense to keep that code or if it makes sense to deprecate it. But either way, we need to make a decision in Newton because the deprecation path is pretty long. So.
No, I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, right? So what Erno said about how it's a horrific piece of code is true. And what you're saying about how registry may play a role in how we do rolling upgrades is also true. But I was thinking we should probably take a more like unbiased approach. Like we can do rolling upgrades with or without registry, right? I think we should take a decision on whether or not we want to keep registry on itself, right, and not hinging upon like anything else. Now I take what Erno is saying about how it's very badly written code and it's so horrific, and that's the same argument on the spec as well. Well, but I feel like we should look at the value that registry provides. Forget how it's implemented for now. If it's really so horrific, we'll probably think about refactoring it. But is that reason enough to get rid of it, right? And we spoke about a couple of reasons why we should take a second look at it yesterday. One of it being, it seems exactly the opposite direction in which Nova is going, right? Now, I don't mean to say that we should follow Nova, but we should at least learn what are the reasons that they're trying to take an approach which is almost like registry, where they have another layer between the services and the others and the database, right? Are there any performance impacts, or there are surely security impacts to it? So what I'm saying is, being a horrific piece of code or rolling upgrade should not really be the factors that we get rid of it or keep it. We should really look at architecturally what is the advantage, disadvantage that it provides, and then we'll improve the code if it's bad, right?
Well, in my point of view, it's not per se. It's not just technically horrible code. I think the registry API is just fundamentally awful on V2, and it just so overcomplicated the whole V2 registry that in my point of view, like if we deprecate it now, it's our internal API. We don't need to actually wait multiple cycles to get rid of it. But in reality, I'm way rather pro actually sitting down and planning and implementing it from scratch than trying to refactor what we have at the moment and trying to make it good if we decide to need it. But that's actually one of the big parts of what we've had is that we tried to figure out if anyone is using the registry with V2, and it doesn't seem to be that case. Like the value what it provides is still actually pretty unclear. For it seems to be that no one is using it because no one sees the value for it.
Yeah, the thing is, like, since V1 is tied with Nova, most people haven't switched to V2. There are a couple of large-scale operators who are using registry for their own benefit. But then again, we cannot maintain a large piece of code.
If I recall correctly from one of the large system ops, they say that it seems to be a little bit beneficial for them, but on basically next sentence they were like, we don't know if there is such a big benefit out of it that there is any reason why we should object removing it. So even they were like, yeah, we are using it, but we really don't care if it goes away.
It wasn't really like they don't care if it goes away. It was more like they would prefer to keep it, but it's sort of thing, so they were okay either way. Yeah, but I sort of agree. Like rewriting from scratch is probably the best thing to do. But I think like we don't really need to rush on this for at least a month and a half, right? So all the things that Hemant brought up, we can rediscuss this when the upgrade spec is ready. We can collectively take an informed decision whether it's deprecate. So for me, it's like let's wait on this until July 29.
To be honest, I'm perfectly fine if we postpone the decision and decide to deprecate it before we release Newton. That's all what I pretty much care.
Sounds good. Hemant, is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
So let's move on to the. Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to the store API refactor. We discussed this a little bit yesterday. It was most around public API refactoring and helping with better testing and providing a better interface and making sure this is a public library which is consumable and maintainable. So that's the focus of the spec. So I think it's fine with me. Maybe we can have more input here. I don't see a lot of developer movement here. So I think we need to wait a couple of weeks and see if somebody is actually starting to implement this, because the client library freezes much before that, and we need to stabilize the library quite a bit before the Newton 3 release. So I would prefer this to be done in the next 3 or so weeks. And if it's not done, let's not do it in Newton. So we can approve the spec. Let's put it in the approve directory, and we can think about implementation when the implementation can go.
Yeah, and to be honest, especially after talking with Mike and actually hearing his concerns, how badly the store API or the store actually at the moment suits, for example, Glare needs, because it's so image specific. I would actually really be happy seeing someone having the cycles to do something about that and make the Glance store to be usable for Glance project for images and Glare for artifacts without Mike and the guys needing to actually write all that from scratch. So I'm way more positive on this, even if it doesn't happen on Newton and it happens on O rather than Newton. I don't have a big feeling about that, but I actually think that it's definitely time to start doing something about the Glance store.
Yes. So in Glare, we are going to use Glance store as is. So we implemented some adapter to use Glance store, and all exceptions are converted to Glare exceptions from Glance store. And now it's okay that Glare puts all data in images container in Swift or in Ceph, doesn't matter. But in future, we have to think about refactoring its API. And anyway, we will have to implement our own store and use it. And I think it's bad. Yeah. But for now, I think for Newton, it's okay to have Glance store as it is right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, if we can start the development in a feature branch, we can merge in early Okata, and Claire can use it and others, and we can have releases and then stabilize the code.
Absolutely, I would really like to see that happening.
Yes, so I think I will join this initiative and I'll review the spec and leave some comments there because it's really a useful feature. I mean, refactoring Blair
Sounds good. So
story.
I think
Yeah.
what we can do. Okay, what we can do is like approve a direction for the spec, and then let's keep on working on a feature branch or something, and then start merging it in the early Okada stuff. So I think having snippets of code that will help us identify what the refactor is going to look and how it's going to help with glance and glare and stuff is going to help. So it's something to review there, Mike.
Great. Next one.
Next one is okay. So if we will have another driver in Glance Store, why not? But someone must support it.
Yeah, I think at this point, like we probably for Newton it seems unlikely because we just don't have. It's still in our work and there were a lot of open questions and there is no movement on this. So I think like it's good if they improve the spec in Newton, but they can add the driver in early Okada.
Mm-hmm.
And then work with the API refactor folks to see if the driver is helpful on front as well. All right. Is someone here to represent the snapshot cleanup daemon process? So it was put -2 for Mitaka. It just needs a restore basically.
I think there are bigger concerns than just that process -2. I think what the spec is saying is that Glance should really be cleaning up all the queued and saving images that are stuck periodically, like Scrubber does it. So they're saying that I forget why they think the actual images end up being in that queued and saving state, but my concern with that is Glance should really not be in a state to say, hey, this is a stuck image and I should delete it. I don't think Glance has any authority to say so. If Glance doesn't create the image, it should not delete the image.
I totally agree with you, Hemant, on that. Like, I personally think that if user leaves a image on a queued state, for example, so create an image and leave it just sitting there, it's that user's responsibility to look after the record as well.
That's good. I think we are pretty much okay with the -2 on this one. Anything else? Right. So community image visibility, some productive discussion, we were able to come up with a minimum viable product sort of a thing that we're going to do. They've broken down the bookmarking with the sharing stuff, and then for Newton, we're going to focus on image visibility semantics, and then some discussion around glance and stuff. So you can see the feedback on line 133. And that's it. So I think like this is in a good direction. It's supposed to be so it is one of the priorities for Newton, and we can get it done. Like Timothy is working hard on this, so looks positive. Any comments?
Yeah, I promised to have a new read on that spec and see what's going on. I have had some comments on there, but I haven't looked into it for quite a while, so I'll get back to it and see how it works out.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Same here. I have to read it again.
All right, Mike and company, distinction layer and layer API. I think distinction layer we sort of discussed with more documentation and commit message updates and stuff. I don't know if any comments.
Again, Nikhil, you ask something?
Sorry, what did you say? Can you please repeat?
I think
So I
we
think, like,
pretty much
pretty
got
much okay with this
through
stuff.
that on now for now, so we can hop on the API, and I'm at least good sitting here for a while more if Mike wants some specific input about that.
About API, about Glare API. I was on API working group meeting, and we discussed this API. They found one issue, so about version discoverability. They don't recommend to use /versions endpoint. They recommend to use just /. So I updated the spec. I removed all sharing API from there, and I think now it's ready. So API working group promised to provide some feedback today. It is Everett Toes and Chris Dent. If they are good with this spec, we can merge it, I think.
I have a little bit mixed feelings about that, because if I recall correctly, Glance moved to use /version because the community wanted that. Did they provide any reasoning why we shouldn't be using /versioning?
It's mentioned in guidelines because we use micro versions. They recommend to use just /. I can share the spec with you. Just a second.
I have it open here in front of me.
Version, yeah, it's here.
Yeah, I'm fine with either way. Like that's fine.
So it was my final change in the spec. to remove versions and use just slash.
Yeah, if it's a guideline, okay, because it's done as project and then it's done as a part of the community workflow, so it's fine. Like, the best thing.
Yeah, Mike, I promised to give you a last read through that spec and make any comments I anyway might have before the weekend. So you have my plus or minus there at Monday morning latest.
Great. Nikhil, what's the final date? When will be the spec freeze?
29 is the hard spec, but let's. I think somebody is. I'm hearing an echo. Can I hear you? Like Hemant and Mike. If you see the mailing list online, the link I have specified on line 79. That's where this is.
Go ahead.
I'm hearing an echo. Hemant, can you mute, please?
No, my Blue Jeans is frozen. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not. I can't do anything here.
Yes, we can. Give me a second.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Spec freeze is July 29. If you see the minute, that week. So let's not wait until the last moment to merge all these important things. This community image, layer, like what else is there? Yeah, those are the major specs. Like registry, we can think on that week because it's not a big code change. Yeah, so maybe early July, I think. Week of July 4th. Most just be mindful that most folks leave on that week due to like Independence Day holiday on the 4th of July. So try to, if you can ping some US-based course before that and see if they're willing to give a review before then. That would be good. And then you and I can basically sit down on that week and then finalize and hopefully merge this spec. Does that sound like a plan?
Okay.
I don't know about you guys, what do you think, but my personal opinion about the Glare specs is pretty much that let's not be too stuck on the free state. In my point of view, the code is so far written, and any changes what we decide to make on that, I don't think are that huge of a changes that they would need too much time. So I think with this specific spec we can be quite flexible on the date because we don't need to leave a month of implementation time at the point when we decide to approve it.
Yeah, so it's better to.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like
merge it.
Yeah, so if you
quick, yeah, talk Nikhil.
Yes, I'm saying like let's merge it in the week of July 4th. So that will give us like a couple of weeks from now. And I think that should be like a good enough time for people to provide reviews and then for you to update that. And if any like syncs need to happen in the middle, like if you need to sync with API working robot dev code, then we have a chance. And we don't have to worry about last minute changes to the API in Muted. So I think like this is a like if we try to focus on the API for the next 2 weeks, let's make sure that all of our concerns are addressed. Let's merge it in the week of July 4th, and then we can focus on the code, actual code, and then if there are any small changes, then we can iteratively improve this package. Make sense?
I think so.
I have nothing against merging it earlier if we get consensus before. Like, let's not just set any fixed dates and let's go by the workflow. But let's try to get people reviewing it as soon as possible.
Absolutely, yeah. So if we get reviews, nothing like approving it in next week, but let's not be so aggressive that we miss out on important reviews and people have to -2 on the last moment. So for now, let's focus on pushing people to do the reviews and make sure that concerns are addressed, and we can merge it before that July 4. So I'm just setting the target of July 4 because we don't want to postpone more than that. That's all it is.
Great to meet. Thanks, guys.
Sounds good, yeah. So about distinction layer, Parrot, please talk.
If we are going to merge with Spec before July 4, okay, I'm not sure. Will we succeed to merge some initial core of a layer into Newton 3? I mean, do we have some time to review code? If we will review Spec too long?
I believe the Spec will be merged next week and code 2 weeks after.
To be honest, I would like to people start reviewing the code already now and pinpointing any concerns what they have if you have the code in a state that it's finally okay to review. Like, just give us the green light and let's start looking at parallel when we look the spec. It also makes easier to understand them both when you are reading them parallel.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Okay, and about this distinction layer, I'll I asked Daria to update the spec to remove all race conditions from there. There are 2 as far as I remember. So what do you think about this change? Can we merge the spec again?
Yeah, so I'll review it. I think possibly later today or tomorrow, because it was mostly okay with people. I think if Enno is fine with the documentation stuff being removed, then it's fine with me too.
Great.
Yeah, and honestly, as I have said, I don't understand the database side well enough that, and I didn't see any big red flags what would cause me to minus it. Like, pretty much only thing what kind of caught my eye there at some point of the discussion was that it was basically what Stuart said on that other patch as well, that it's kind of it's claiming that it fixes the race conditions, which it actually doesn't do, but it just reduces the possibility of them happening. So as long as we don't overcommit what it's doing, I'm just fine getting it done, and hopefully it improves as much as the tests shows that it's doing. So let's hope everyone is happy after we got that in.
Cool.
Okay.
So are there any other topics?
No, I think we are done for today. In terms of topics, if there are any open concerns, then we can maybe give 5 minutes. I think. Oh, Hemant left. Okay. So, Niall, anything?
No, I've got nothing.
Ping on IRC if you have a problem get your voice said, and otherwise I just got the recording now, and we can stick online if people have just other things to talk about.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a plan. I don't have anything specific.
Okay, I'll cut the recording and I'll leave the conference open for a while if you guys have anything you want to discuss about that. Doesn't need to be on the record.